Hello and welcome. Today, we're jumping right into a fascinating historical detective story. We're talking about ancient caves, scrolls hidden from millennia, and a thousand-year-old mystery surrounding one of the most important books in human history. To really get this, let's just do a quick thought experiment. I want you to imagine you're writing a really important letter, something you want to last forever. And you're writing it way back in 1400 BC. Now, imagine that for the next 3,000 years. There's no printing press, no photocopiers, nothing. The only way to preserve your letter is for people to sit down and copy it out, word for word, by hand, generation after generation. So here's the big question. After all that time and all those thousands of handwritten copies, would the version we have today still say what you originally wrote? That right there is the core question we are going to explore today when it comes to the Torah. You see, for the longest time, historians and scholars had this massive headache, a 1,000-year gap in the evidence. The oldest complete copies we had of the Hebrew Bible were from around the year 1000 AD. But the stories themselves, they took place thousands of years before that. So what happened in that giant silent gap? Was the text we had the real deal? All right, so to crack this case, we first need to get a few key terms straight. Think of these as the essential tools in our historical detective kit. First up, the Torah. This is the main text we're investigating. It's the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These are the foundational stories, from creation to Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. This is our important letter. Next, the word manuscript. It sounds kind of fancy, but all it means is a handwritten copy. And you have to remember, before the printing press showed up in the 1400s, this was it. This was the only way to make a copy of a book. And you can imagine, with every new copy, there's a chance a tiny little error could sneak in. And that brings us to the Masoretic text. For centuries, this was the gold standard, the official, authoritative version of the Hebrew Bible. It was painstakingly preserved by Jewish scholars. But here's the catch that created our mystery. The oldest complete copy we had of it only dates back to about 1008 AD. And there it is. That's our 1,000-year gap. But then, in 1947, everything changed. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you see in movies. A young shepherd, a lost goat, and a random cave near the Dead Sea. And a discovery that would completely rewrite history. And just like that, bam! That 1,000-year gap we've been talking about, it just vanished overnight. The Dead Sea Scrolls were dated from about 250 BC to 68 AD. Suddenly, we had a snapshot of the text from 1,000 years before our previous oldest copy. It was an absolute game changer. And what a snapshot it was. We're talking about a library frozen in time. Inside those caves, they found hundreds of different manuscripts, including fragments from every single book of the Hebrew Bible except for Esther. These were, and still are, the oldest copies of these texts anyone has ever found. So this was the ultimate test. It was the moment of truth. Scholars could now take these ancient scrolls and lay them side by side with the Masoretic text from 1,000 years later and ask the big question. Had the stories completely changed? Was the creation story different? Was Moses still the hero of Exodus? This was the million-dollar question that had puzzled people for centuries. And the answer, from a massive consensus of scholars, we're talking secular, Jewish, Christian, you name it, was a clear and resounding no. The fundamental story, the core narrative, had not changed. Now, were there differences? Yes, absolutely, but they weren't the bombshells you might expect. The differences they found were mostly minor. Think of it like a family recipe for chocolate chip cookies passed down for generations. One version might say, add 1 cup of sugar, and a later one might clarify, add 1 cup of white sugar. Does it change the cookie? Not really. It's the same basic recipe. That's what we see here, little wording changes, or adding his son after someone's name just to be clear. Nothing that actually changes the plot. I mean, this source material puts it perfectly. You will not find a Dead Sea Scroll version of Genesis where the world is created in a totally different way. You won't find a version of Exodus where the Israelites just decide to stay in Egypt. The main plot, the characters, the theology, it's all remarkably stable across that 1,000-year divide. But the story doesn't stop there. The Dead Sea Scrolls are amazing, but they aren't just a single lonely piece of evidence. They're actually just one link in what the source material calls an unbreakable chain of proof. This is where the case becomes incredibly strong.
Each of these is like an independent witness in a court case. You have the Dead Sea Scrolls. But at the exact same time, way over in Egypt, the Torah was being translated into Greek. That's the Septuagint, a totally separate copy line. Then you've got the Samaritan Pentateuch. This was a version of the Torah preserved by a rival religious community. I mean, these groups were not friends. They had every reason to change the text to fit their own views, but they didn't. They tell the same core story. It's like having three people who have never met all tell you the exact same story. That's some powerful evidence.
Now, this unbreakable chain of evidence is super useful because it lets us investigate specific claims. And one of the most common objections you hear today is that the original Torah was deliberately changed to remove prophecies about the Prophet Muhammad. So let's put that claim to the test using our evidence. The timeline is absolutely crucial here. The Dead Sea Scrolls were already written, sealed in jars and hidden in caves more than 600 years before Muhammad was even born. The Greek Septuagint is even older, by about 800 years. If those prophecies were originally in the text, they would have to be in these ancient copies, but they simply aren't. For the claim of removal to be true, you'd have to imagine this massive, global conspiracy between groups that were often hostile to each other. Jews, Samaritans, Christians, all agreeing to perfectly remove the exact same verses from every single copy on Earth and somehow leave no trace of it ever happening. From a historical standpoint, that scenario just isn't considered plausible. What's also really interesting is how the source material points out that, from a theological perspective within Islam, the Quran itself seems to affirm this very same chain of preservation. It talks about Moses receiving the Torah, about later prophets judging by it, about Jesus confirming the version that was available in his day, and it refers to the Torah as a source of guidance and light. Okay, so we've followed the evidence, we've examined the claims, and the mystery of the 1,000-year gap has been solved. But let's zoom out for a second. What's the big takeaway here? Why does any of this matter to us today? Well, what this all means is, first, we have confirmation of a truly remarkable feat of human preservation, a story transmitted with incredible accuracy for over 2,000 years. Second, it shows us that finding small differences in ancient manuscripts is actually normal. It's a sign that they're authentic, not that they're corrupted. And finally, this whole story is just a masterclass in how historians use multiple, independent lines of evidence to build a rock-solid case about what happened in the ancient world. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. The journey of this text is just extraordinary. Copied by hand, passed between rival communities, spread across continents, lost for centuries, and then rediscovered in a desert cave. If a story can survive that journey and come out so remarkably intact, what does that challenge us to reconsider about our own connection to the ancient past? Thanks for joining this explainer.